So I'm an artist, so I'm a multidisciplinary artist. So I practice traditional Benin bronze casting. I also do other forms of art, such as painting, blacksmithing, which I learned recently. Um, and yeah, I'm also a musician as well.
Interesting. So, how did you come about this concept, and what exactly is this that we're standing behind?
So this is the largest traditional Benin bronze plaque
Ever.
ever made. So it's and it's a hieroglyph. And the reason I made this is to convey to as a way of showing and proving that the Benin bronze plaques, which were stolen and are still housed in a lot of foreign museums, European museums, are in fact hieroglyphs. And hieroglyphs are, for example, most people when they hear the term hieroglyph, they associate that with ancient Egypt, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were drawings, the way that they wrote in a form of drawing, and that's recognized as an official form of writing. Whereas that same recognition wasn't given to the Benin artifacts because they were just kind of treated like regular pieces of art, which is not the case because they were actually a form of writing. So the guilds, Benin houses the oldest living guilds in the world. So some of the guilds that are still living, and it's these guilds are membership to these guilds is passed down hereditarily. So the current existing members of the guilds are actually the direct descendants of the original members. It's passed down. You can't become a member. So it's very, very fascinating. And some of these guilds date back to like 900 AD. So they're very, very ancient, and the fact that they're still living to this day, that these guilds are still being passed down and they're still operating just as normal with non-stop is really, really incredible. And the fact that not many people are aware of, and it's not really shared in international history books, and this story is not coming out. So it's a way of showing that one, ancient Benin, the concept of ancient Benin, I believe was invented by museums as a way of dissociating the kind of this concept of ancient Benin from Benin today, because you understand they created this concept that is some kind of ancient civilization that has nothing to do with us. Actually, the Benin people aren't associated with the Benin bronzes at all. There's a lot of esteem for these bronzes, but that esteem isn't given to the Benin people. It's just we're completely, Benin has actually been dissociated from those artifacts because of this concept of ancient Benin, which is now like dissociated. It's like
So
they,
the
yes.
Benin people don't want to associate with.
No, not the Benin people. I mean the foreign world. So, so like the museums that house these artifacts don't acknowledge the fact that this is an ancient civilization, not a dead civilization.
Right.
But when we talk about ancient Benin, we're not talking about a dead civilization. We're talking about ancient because of the age. It's a very old civilization. So that gets mixed up with these museums. They've actually created this notion that ancient Benin is a dead civilization. It's like it's completely separate from Benin today. So when they stole these brasses, I felt it's quite clear that these bronzes that were displayed in their museums, they were treated like artifacts that they dug up, like dinosaur fossils. You understand? Like they acted like they were anthropologists, and they just dug these dinosaur fossils, and that's how they treated these Benin bronzes. It's dissociated from Benin.
Right.
Because it doesn't acknowledge the fact that people were still making the same bronzes. They never stopped. You understand? So there's this esteem for these artworks, but they're still being made the same way, in the same fashion. So that's what I wanted to demonstrate that by creating this work.
So what does this depict precisely? I mean, you said it could be like a writing
Yes.
hieroglyph. So what does this particular one?
So this is an example of a form of a hieroglyph. So depicting the true life of Obaawari Ogidigan. So Obaawari the First, who was essentially credited as the first warrior king and really the first real emperor of Benin. He is called Obaawari the Great because he's essentially the one who made the kingdom into an empire and created what we now associate as the Bronze Age. He was also the first Oba of Benin to encounter Europeans and establish the long-term 400-year relationship with Portugal, long before colonialism. So Benin actually has a 400-year history with Portugal. So I wanted to create a same kind of hieroglyph and plaque that would be very easily identifiable. As always, that the fact that if you saw this, you would know the story was depicting. So
That if you're familiar with the
Now,
story.
if you're familiar with the story. So the key here is that in ancient Benin, it was believed that only the Oba had the authority to sit on a horse. So in this plaque, you will notice that there are two figures on the horse. So that already stands out, that there can't be two Obas at once. One of them is the real Oba and one of them isn't. So Obawari I, he began his life as Prince Ogun, that was his name. So when the Oba becomes the Oba, he chooses his title, his a new name. So when he was Prince Ogun, he was actually sent into exile by the palace chiefs. You know, he had some kind of conflicts within the palace, you know, some palace intrigues, and he ended up having to go into exile for many years, and he took his younger brother with him. So Oba Ohen, who I explained earlier, was the Oba who is depicted with the mudfish legs, was his father. And so Oba Ohen, before his death, he had decreed that all his sons, he had 4 sons, that all of them would rule in succession. So in that time, the rule of primogeniture hadn't been established fully, so it was very common for basically all the sons of the Oba were equally entitled to become Oba. So there were a lot of fighting and things like that. So he made that decree to kind of guarantee that all his sons would rule one after the other. So when when Prince Ogun went into exile and he took his younger brother, yeah. So this is actually the figure representing Prince Ogun.
Oh, this is Prince Ogun.
Yeah. So this is the real Obawari. So
what's this?
so that's the usurper. So his younger brother was called Iruge, so Prince Iruge, and when he was in exile, at some point after many years, he sent the younger brother back to Benin to kind of find out if the coast was clear, find out what was going on in Benin, because they hadn't been there for many years. So when Prince Iruge went back to Benin, he was really welcomed because they hadn't known that their older brother had actually recently passed away. So the kingdom had no Oba. The 2 last princes were in exile. Nobody knew where they were. The kingdom was in disarray. So he was welcomed with such kind of, you know, like a godsend, and he got that taste of power for the first time. So when they asked about his brother, he denied that he didn't know where Ogun was. He said that his brother died in the forest, so that they would crown him. So he now became Oba Waifiokun. So that's Oba Waifiokun. So he was the usurper. So he took his brother's throne, and immediately upon taking the throne, he sent assassins to kill Prince Ogun. So he had to actually then evade. So you can actually see how that's depicted in this plaque. So for example, you see this trap here. These are some of the images you'll see in this plaque are actually taken from some of the existing plaques, inspired by some of the existing plaques that were stolen, to show that how they conveyed the history.
What does this serpent here on this building depict?
Okay, so basically the traditional palace, so you can see the recreation of it there as well. In the plaques that you'll see from about ancient Benin, you'll find this design, which was the palace with the pyramid and the snake on the middle. And so that snake actually was made of bronze. It was just the architecture of the palace. And the snake was there because it was kind of meant to ward off evil spirits from entering the palace. It was believed that you wouldn't be able to pass under that snake to enter the palace if you had any evil intentions or had any evil spirits. So in this plaque, I actually depicted it as a real snake. So you can actually see the weight of it crushing the palace. So it's actually depicted as a real snake here to show that the usurper is the one in the palace. So it doesn't belong to him.
Right.
So then we have the story is very interesting, but to show you, for example, just going in a circular motion, you will notice that the actual geometry of the piece it has this kind of circular motion that draws your eyes in a circular motion. Because like I said, the plaque actually depicts 2 things simultaneously. On top of as the fact that it's depicting the true life of Obawari I, it's simultaneously depicting the Benin belief in reincarnation.
Right. One would wonder how long it took you to come up with this design. Weeks, days, months?
To come up with design really didn't take long. It was very, I think kind of maybe took me a day to come up with the story and the way I wanted to depict it. But to do the casting and to work takes a very long time. I've actually been working on this for almost 2 years. And actually it didn't take that long. At some point, you know, I had some kind of setbacks. You know, it's a difficult kind of process, a long process, you know, so it takes time and it's not something you can really rush. And obviously it's a team effort. So some of the people here are actually some of the members of my team, you know, that actually assisted me in the process, you know, so the welders and, you know, to bring this all together. And obviously after you finish your casting, it has to be cleaned, you know, and polished, you know, traditionally to make it come out. The piece is actually dedicated to the Iyase of Benin, who's my grandfather. And the reason that is because I learned everything I know about Benin history from him. He's one of the great historians of Benin history and one of the real gatekeepers, really, of Benin, being the ESA. And so he was through him that he put a lot of effort to actually teaching me about our history and teaching me about Benin cultures, about the monarchy and things like that. And so that's actually where I got all my knowledge from about Benin history and being able to create this work. So it's dedicated to both my grandparents.
Very, very happy now for a young man to put things together to produce this. I'm happy.
Earlier you mentioned something about people noting Benin women or Benin men for various vices, and this is like an exception to that.
Yes, most people, especially from Benin, Edo State, people think unless we travel out, that's the only way you can make it. I don't think so. He has a passport to all countries, but he's doing this in his country. So I think this one will encourage a lot of young ones to put things together in your country to produce something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you started this project, how did you feel? Did you think it was going to come out like this?
No, I didn't think like that. I thought he was joking.
You thought he was joking?
But seeing it now, I'm happy and ready to encourage him.
You said he's a doctor,
Yes,
a medical doctor.
medical doctor. He has a break because of this coronavirus. So he put it together during this break.